I brought something for the group. Can anybody tell what this is? Any other guesses? It's money. It's the first form of money that we ever used 7,000 years ago. It was used for 7,000 years. In fact, they used cowrie shells for money until the 1950s. So, who will sell me their watch for some of this money? You, sir. Will you sell me your watch? 2. Not enough. That's all I've got. I wasn't able to check a bag flying from San Francisco. Yeah, maybe we can have somebody count it for us. I'm trying to make a point here. The point is that money evolves. Money evolves just like technology evolves. Money is a type of technology. Cowrie shells were good for money for 7,000 years, but they've been replaced. What have they been replaced by? Well, there's been a series of advancements that we've seen. But before we get into one of those advancements that I particularly feel strongly about, which is Bitcoin, I'd like to... It's okay. I'll raise my voice. I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak in front of you. It's exciting for me. It's a humbling experience. I haven't been to Dubai before. And what I've learned very quickly is that there are 2 characteristics that I see embedded in society here. And it's an exciting combination for me as an entrepreneur. The first thing that I see is entrepreneurial bravery. I see the willingness, and you saw it woven throughout all the talks thus far today, the willingness to take chances, to make big bets. And you see it with the hotels, and you see it with the real estate development, and you see it in the different types of technology that are springing up all over the city and all over this region. The second characteristic that excites me is the ability and the willingness to make specific empirical targets. We're going to achieve X amount of this. We're going to achieve Y amount of that. And you see many of these targets being set by the government. You don't see this in the United States. They don't want to take accountability. As an investor, as somebody that's a fiduciary for limited partners investment funds in the United States and in parts of Asia, we like to see accountability. We like to see people that are willing to put a stake in the ground and go for that goal. Win, lose, or draw, at least they're making a commitment to accountability. So anyway, thank you. It's exciting to be here. Let's jump into things. I have way more slides than we'll ever get through in the next 17 minutes. But what I'd like to do is take you through what we feel at Redwood City Ventures is the single best form of money that we've ever devised as the human race. So a little bit about me. I spent 5 years doing leverage buyouts in San Francisco at a firm called Bertram Capital. We managed about $1.5 billion and bought and sold companies that were sort of middle-of-the-road technology companies in various vertical markets throughout the United States. I felt so strongly about Bitcoin after making a few angel investments back in late 2013 and early 2014 that I decided to leave the private equity world and start a venture firm with a couple of friends of mine. We manage about $25 million in portfolio right now. Our largest portfolio company happens to be a data center, the largest blockchain security data center in North America. And we're very proud of that achievement. It was a gamble that we took. But we feel that investing in hard assets that have real tangible value is a good foundation upon which to build our other investments in the Bitcoin and the larger blockchain ecosystem. But moreover, something that we've done collectively, my team and I, is we've acted as product strategists and product managers for a wide variety of online and mobile businesses over the years. And what struck us about Bitcoin was that it's a disparate market with a wide variety of well-funded and less well-funded companies that are sort of competing with each other. There's not enough collaboration, where we feel Bitcoin really should be viewed as a single product that all companies in the ecosystem should seek to gain customer adoption for. And if we're successful in achieving that customer adoption, we'll achieve Bitcoin's killer app. We'll achieve mainstream adoption. So let's go through that a little bit. This is sort of the genesis of our interest in Bitcoin, and we see it as the combination of three primary characteristics or three primary trends, those being e-commerce, social networking, and monetary evolution, as I started this presentation out with. So what's our argument? It's fourfold. The first is that Bitcoin's killer app is inherently Bitcoin. What is a killer app? Well, a killer app means mainstream adoption. We'll go through some statistics here momentarily that will try to quantify what the adoption rate of Bitcoin has been, which we believe is the most established. It's certainly the oldest blockchain in existence. It's the system that was built on top of the world's first blockchain. And then finally, rounding it out, all we need to do is look at Bitcoin as a whole, as if we're product marketing the whole of Bitcoin. Execute that go-to-market strategy, and with an advanced position, which of course we have because of the investment activities that we make in North America and abroad, we'll achieve a great return on investment. In fact, we believe that this may be the best investment opportunity that exists in Silicon Valley today, in new technology, period. So we'll see if I can support that in the next few minutes with some evidence for you audience. And the process that we'll go through is to look at it as a single product, as I mentioned. We're going to have to skip some of this stuff and move along. But the first step that we like to go through as product marketers is the step of asking the basic questions, the step of determining what the first principles are. What are the raw materials that we're going to start with? And what are the key problems that we're going to try to solve? What are the assumptions that we're making? Who are our target users? And what resources do we have to achieve those goals? So the current situation. As we see it, we've got about 500,000 customers for Bitcoin. We've got a Bitcoin price that varies quite a bit from day to day and week to week. It's currently sitting at $1,100 or $1,200 US per Bitcoin. We see 300,000 transactions per day. There's some developer turmoil, which we certainly don't need to get into today, and regulatory uncertainty in various regions around the world. But we see, if we dig into the details, we see an interesting trend. We see what we believe is a causal relationship between the growth of the customer base in Bitcoin, which again, remember, we point out that we see it as a social network. We see it as a piece of technology. We see it as a new form of money, but it's a social network, which means that the larger it grows, the faster it will grow, just like we saw with Facebook, just like we've seen with other networks in technological history. So if you look at the last 18 months, you can see an average monthly growth rate of about 2% in the user base of Bitcoin. And that has led to, in our calculation, about an 8% growth in the exchange rate between US dollars and Bitcoin. We find that to be an interesting correlation, and we do see some causality. There's another factor that many of you are probably aware of. It occurred in the summer of this year, and it was called the halving. The production of Bitcoin was cut in half from 3,600 Bitcoin a day to 1,800 a day. That's obviously going to reduce the supply, which in a market like Bitcoin where the prices are set on the margin, the daily supply is going to have a meaningful impact on the price. So we can't ignore this factor. So our goal is to reach 1 million users. So we've got to nearly double our user base, and we believe that if we do that, we'll achieve great benefits for the ecosystem, for all the startups that are struggling to achieve liftoff before they reach the end of their runway, and to users of Bitcoin around the world. But how are we going to do that? We've got to we've got to achieve desired action on behalf of prospective customers. And the only way that you can get somebody to take the action that you desire is if you get them to feel the way that you'd like them to feel, so that it inspires them to take action, so it inspires them to spend money and what have you. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist in the mid-1950s. We don't have time to get into his philosophies and his theorems, but we believe that it's highly applicable to what I will present as our go-to market strategy for Bitcoin and its growth from 500,000 to 1 million users. Product market fit, that's a term that's used quite widely in the startup community, certainly throughout Silicon Valley and in my world for the last decade or two. Startups work diligently to try to craft their product with as few resources and as little time spent as possible to see if they've reached a minimum viable product, to see if they've reached product market fit. Well, what we think with regards to Bitcoin is that the product's already good. The product's already great. And in fact, we can achieve product market fit through the changes that we see occurring in the world today. The market is actually moving towards our product. Not to mention the fact that many of our target customers don't even know about Bitcoin yet. They haven't been made aware of it and what it actually is. They may have heard that it was used to facilitate illegal transactions or what have you, but the reality is that it's a much more benevolent and beneficial factor and influence on monetary transactions and commercial transactions throughout the world. But what is Bitcoin? So this may seem like a silly question, but I grew up ski racing in Michigan, which is in the Midwest of the United States, very snowy, very cold. And every year at the beginning of the season, our coach, Sven Olsen, would make all of us skiers spend a week skiing in a V formation down the bunny slope, which seemed ludicrous to us. We asked him, Coach Olsen, why would we be forced to do this for a week? We're blowing the first part of the winter. We should be running the gates, which should be talking about our strategies. And what he said was, you have to understand the basics. You have to revisit the most basic questions at hand. You have to make sure, because every time you revisit the basics and every time you revisit those questions, you're going to make new discoveries. You're going to make new discoveries which will become the touchstone of real evolutionary growth. So the 6 characteristics of money, we played a little game at the outset of this, but here's a more rigorous and methodical way to look at the attributes of money. And you can apply this to any form of money that we've had throughout history. And we break it down to an acronym, SDDRFT. And in fact, you can score empirically or quantitatively various forms of money and compare them against each other. So this is a polar plot, and each one of the 6 dimensions is a score from 0 to 4 of a type of money. So you see from gold to Argentinian pesos to cowrie shells, Starbucks cards, frequent flyer miles, and Bitcoin. Transportability, scarcity, durability, divisibility, recognizability, and fungibility. And what we see, and this is the fundamental basis of the bold claim and the bold argument that we make, which is that Bitcoin is the best form of money that we've ever existed. Is it a replacement for fiat currency? It is a replacement for other forms of money? Absolutely not. But just like other forms of technology, just like media, file sharing, and what have you, they develop and they run alongside traditional technologies. There's plenty of space for a variety of technologies to coexist. And a quick note on recognizability. You may have read about this in China, but they've gotten quite good at counterfeiting gold. They take a tungsten bar and they coat it with a thin layer of gold, and the fact is the density of tungsten isn't that far off of the density of gold. So unless you're a sophisticated buyer and you perform the certain assay techniques, you can get taken for a ride. And that just underscores the recognizability of money, which means how difficult is it to counterfeit that form of money. We're going to skip through this stuff. I think that you've probably read about some of the transactions that Bitcoin can assist in and offer superior benefits to other forms of money. There's a variety of categories of transactions. We tend to look at consumer to consumer and consumer to business. So then you ask, what are the target customers? So if we're going to try to achieve 1 million customers for Bitcoin, we've got to figure out who we're going after. We can't boil the ocean. We have finite resources. So here are a few. We're going to focus in on the number one target customer base here, and it's individual investors. And what would we say to them? So we need a sales pitch. Going back to Abraham Maslow, we need to speak to our target customers in a language using a dialogue and vocabulary that will resonate with them and get them to feel the way that we want them to feel, get them to act the way we want them to act. So everything from a store of value to a non-correlated asset class, the SDDRFT that I mentioned, simple portfolio diversification. If you find a new non-correlated asset class, you'd be well served to divest a portion of your pre-existing portfolio into that asset class. Here are a few charts that demonstrate the correlation or lack thereof. You can see here, related to Bitcoin versus Argentinian peso, a few of the investment categories ranging from real estate to S&P 500 and what have you. It's highly non-correlated. Another message that resonates, we find, with individual investors is a message that was introduced by a gentleman by the name of John Exter, who in fact was the president of the New York branch of the Federal Reserve System in the United States. He appreciated power money at the bottom of the pyramid, which was the most scarce form of money, upon which all other forms of money were built. And you can see his quote, "We are in a world of irredeemable paper money, a state of affairs unprecedented in history." That's a rather bold and controversial statement for the president of the New York Fed to make. Moving forward to a more recent current event, you can see, and I'm sure we all know, that Bitcoin has performed well as an asset class over the last couple of years. People view it as a currency. We don't personally, but rather an asset class, as we've mentioned. So now we ask ourselves, what resources do we have? Well, as many of you probably know, the way new Bitcoin are created is through a process called mining. And through mining, there were 3,600 Bitcoins produced per day up until July or August of 2016. There are now 1,800 Bitcoins produced per day, 54,000 a month. And that's a substantial asset because that's distributed to the data centers like our blockchain security data center and other miners throughout the world, many of which are in China. It's a valuable asset that we can use to support our customer acquisition campaign. There are also the existing holders of Bitcoin. The market cap, or the monetary base, as some would say, has grown quite large. We've got 500,000 people that own at least one Bitcoin, and we've got a network. We've got a network that just won't die. What do I mean by that? Well, there's websites dedicated to Bitcoin obituaries that have been released steadily throughout the years. You can see some of these headlines from Wired magazine. Wired, tired, expired. From stellar to suck. That was when Bitcoin was trading at $13, 13 US dollars. Bitcoin's financial network is doomed, from the Washington Post. So on and so forth. I think that if I were a journalist, I'd be rather reluctant to publish such an article in this day and age. So what strategies do we have for growth? Well, direct selling is effective. Online marketing tactics are effective. Starting in a small geography is proven. You look at how Facebook grew. Facebook is the largest country on the planet by population with 1.5 billion people. But it started in a single Harvard dormitory. They achieved critical mass, they avoided the empty room problem, and they were able to grow in a strategic and methodical way. We've missed that initial boat for Bitcoin because we launched on the internet to everybody connected, 3 billion people at once in 2009. That's okay, we can still focus our customer acquisition and marketing efforts to small geographic targeted areas. How do we spread the message? There's no shortage of books written on the subject. This is a statistic that we can use to measure our growth and to determine our success. It's the viral coefficient of social network growth. So if we're able to get our viral coefficient above 1, that means that we're growing. If we're hovering around 1, that means we'll be stable. And if we drop below, we better spend some more money. So let's get to a specific campaign, and then we'll wind things right up. A targeted market, you can see some of the markets here. Here's the pitch. We already talked about it. Outreach strategy. We talk about an affiliate marketing campaign in each of our target markets. Budget and schedule. $50 per new customer. These are well-established tactics for other markets, other products. This is something that we need to spend 10 seconds on. It's an economic theory that's been well proven over the years called the price elasticity of supply. It relates to the virtuous cycle that we predict if we start spending real money into customer acquisition for Bitcoin. Because as people see the price of a commodity go up, in traditional commodities, whether it be corn or pork, what have you, marginal producers will increase their production. But as we all know, the production of Bitcoin is fixed, 1,800 a day, 54,000 a month. And so we're left with the holders of Bitcoin. And what's the psychology when you see something that you know is scarce start to go up in price? You're going to hoard it even more closely because you know that to rebuy that asset, you're going to have to purchase it from the same market that you would sell it out into. And why would you sell into the market only to have to buy back at a higher price? So a quick model that we put together. Let's see, bottom line this, 30 million in, 24-month execution plan, $500,000 a month for customer acquisition gets us 10,000 new customers a month. It may sound like a small number of people, but in fact, because the Bitcoin production is so scarce, it absorbs 20% of new Bitcoin produced. So we believe that TVPI ends up at 813%. The ROI on expenditures, the $12 million over 24 months, is nearly 2,000%. So that's why we've positioned ourselves in this way, and that's why we're laying the groundwork and putting the money in to begin this customer acquisition campaign. This is just another bar chart that depicts the return on investment. And I want to thank you all so much. I hope I haven't gone too far over time, Mo, but we'll call it quits there. Thank you again.